Hi, welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, TIFF's Senior International Programmer for Canada, and this is The Other Thing I Do. My guest this week is Ant Timpson, a New Zealand filmmaker who spent a decade producing clever genre projects like The Greasy Strangler, Housebound, Turbo Kid, and Censor. In 2019, he embarked on a directorial career with Come to Daddy, starring Elijah Wood. He reunites with Wood for his latest, Bookworm, a downright charming little film about a Kiwi kid and her American dad who set off into the wild to search for a mythological tiger. It's opening the Fantasia Film Festival in Montreal this Thursday, July 18th, and honestly, it's something pretty special. Ant picked The Naked Prey, Cornel Wilde's 1965 survival thriller about a veteran safari guide, played by Wilde himself, who, after his patron insults a party of African tribespeople, finds himself alone and hunted across what feels like the entirety of South Africa, defending himself only with his wits and his capacity for savagery. I'd never seen this until Ant chose it, and honestly, it might be a masterpiece. He'll tell you. This is Someone Else's Movie.
I just felt it was a film that had a profound impact on me when I saw it, and so I thought it was. And also, look, I think it's one it's a really discoverable title for a lot of people. I feel like when if they haven't seen it or don't know about it, that it's a revelation when they catch it, and it's just primal filmmaking, and I feel like it stands alone. But it's also I've just got deep connections with that whole man alone subgenre. And I think I don't know whether it's a particular thing for me or people from my around my age that we grew up with, Africa as the great unknown continent, and it was that whole, just post-colonial, it just offered a sense of true escape and adventure for a middle class Europeans in distant lands, and so it's it resonated very, very deeply with me when I first saw it.
I have to say, it was a blind spot for me. This is a film I knew about it, but I had never seen it, and somehow when the Criterion release happened, even though I cover their stuff and I'm on their mailing list for decades, back to the Laserdisc days, I got neither the DVD nor the Blu-ray. I missed it completely. And so I went out and I grabbed it and I brought it home and watched it. And I really was not prepared for, as you say, the primal filmmaking. And you're worried at the very beginning that there'll be too much exoticism or that there'll be any kind of. It was made in 1965, and when you think about the views of Africa that were in, say, a Bond film at that time, which was the way that they used the world as their travelogue. This was remarkably sensitive to the cultures, incorporating the music, and treating characters whose language we are not allowed to understand because there are no subtitles in the film whatsoever, with not just agency but intelligence and emotional range. And it's such a demonstrative film in terms of the performances that we understand what people are thinking and doing and saying, even if we can't literally understand it. And for all of this to be this kind of weird footnote in Cornel Wilde's career as an actor, I find even more fascinating. Michael Atkinson in the essay in the Criterion edition compares him to Sam Fuller, which had never occurred to me, but yeah, absolutely, that makes perfect sense. So I wanted to start really by asking you when you saw this. At what point did you encounter it?
I mean, I saw it very, very young on television. That's the first time that I saw it, and it was right around sort of escaping into literature, the Wilbur Smith novels of that sort of 70s, early 70s, and tying them with that as well. And so, and also, I'm a kid who grew up reading Willard Price, right, which are probably incredibly insensitive, inappropriate books now, but for teenagers, it was two brothers and their dad who traveled around the world, and each novel was set in a different area, and it was a very European look at other cultures, but they were always escapist, and they were they were very similar to updated Tarzan, the Weissmuller sort of exploration films. So yeah, so I saw it on television, and I just remember being, I just vividly remember specific scenes. As a kid, obviously it was the torture and cruelty stuff at the beginning, to the insensitive safari hunt, those chaps, and the torture methods are so extreme and over the top. As a youngster, I mean, they still hold up. Like, I don't know how you felt about it, but I just remember like that vivid imagery of that person turning into a giant. They make him into basically a human crock pot, and
Yeah.
warm him over the fire. It's just like the most inhuman torture I could think of. Very suitable for the for that incredible actor who plays the Afrikaans guy, who's the instigator of the entire film. He's the one that sets off the chain of conflict throughout the whole film. But yeah, so it was as a child I saw it on television, and then I didn't see it for a long time. I'm just going to go off on weird tangents because it's early in the morning, and so
Please.
but it's also I remember realizing that it came out in the year of my birth. So for some unknown reason, I have a real fondness of tracking down films as well that are from 1966, and so of the year of release. So it was one of those, and then it just took me a long, long time to catch up with it. And I remember seeing, obviously, the pan and scan doesn't help a lot.
I was going to say, this is a film that was,
Yeah.
It's travelogue-y in that way that was very, very popular when scope came in. You can use this to capture vistas. You can use it to showcase worlds that people hadn't seen. But it's also so focused on human faces that even in pan and scan, you'd lose some of the face in some of the close-ups. It would just fill the screen.
Yeah, which is why I ended up, it was the most expensive film print I ever bought down the line. Like, I collect film prints, and I came across a beautiful anamorphic print of it, and it's just stunning IB Technicolor. So it was seeing it in that projected, it just became it just sort of escalated to a whole new tier for me. But the cinematography is really interesting. It's not it doesn't glamorize Africa and how it was in later films. I mean, obviously the Redford Street out of Africa is like the quintessential, gorgeous savannas and such. But Naked Prey is really, you feel the sweat around the lens, and it's dirty, it's grimy. And it just gives it that sort of kinetic nature for the entire film, which is honestly, it's the hook of I think, is it called The Heart of the Lion? I wrote a note somewhere about it. Yeah, The Chance of the Lion, which is the whole premise of giving Cornel Wilde the head start with the arrow, and when he passes they shoot off an arrow, the Bushmen shoot off an arrow, and when he passes that mark of the arrow, that's when the chase begins, and he's obviously been stripped naked before that. But just that sense of, like, I don't know. I just mean I still get shivers thinking about inserting yourself into such a situation where it's like you cannot become any more primal than being absolutely stripped naked in the middle of the bush and running for your life with spears right behind you. So the setup is just ferocious filmmaking, and I feel like Wilde's passion for the area, for the people of the area, for the type of film that he wanted to make. There's a bit of madness in there. There's a little, it feels Herzogian, and the kind of like the like, we are going to do this no matter what. And obviously there was a lot of danger involved in filming on location. I can't imagine that film being, at one stage it was being prepped for a US shoot or something. So I don't know, see how they could have done it as much as the sort of, the realism that exudes throughout the entire film.
Yeah, it is a remarkable thing to watch it and realize there is virtually no dialogue after the first 10 minutes. Nobody, even to the point where people don't plead for their lives. It's all very stoic, right? Everyone just assumes that this is going to happen and tries to either stiff upper lip it or be so drunk that they can't respond to whatever's happening. There is the vague sense, I think, that the man, that, well, nobody even has names. Cornel Wilde's character is literally identified as man. And then there's second man for the Rhodesian, or for the Afrikaans. And it's so simple and direct that it almost transposes itself into a new genre. It takes the survival story and strips it down even further to muscle and sinew and yeah, the inhumanity at the very beginning just tells you right away that this is not a film that's going to be merciful, that there is no, even if he survives, he's going to be a shell of a man, that this is going to take everything he has simply to endure.
Yeah, it's the stoicism that is, you're absolutely right. Like when Wilde is watching those, other members of the safari just getting tortured, he's just sort of standing there, just like soaking it all in, kind of like, I know how this is all going to play out. I know what I need to do, which is, all you want from a hero. But there's, I like about the film is that it is not devoid of humor. There's a sense of, amazingly, there's some very sort of fun, whimsical scenes throughout the film, especially when the little girl becomes involved and they have that great sort of drinking song that he teaches her that she speaks. I mean, I think Wilde's background as a linguistics guy, comes through, and also his physicality, which was, very well known. He was sort of like, born for these types of roles, even though he played Chopin or whatever, and was, had the leading man and obviously the huge theater background, but you couldn't sort of, you cut from a cloth a more striking, handsome leading figure. And so it all comes back to, like, if you want a guy stripped naked and being a stoic, non-judgmental, empathetic person to be put into these conditions, you couldn't get a better actor for the job. Like, yeah, he's just. I mean, I love that he cast himself. Like, it was, it's that personal connection to the material is what transcends it.
I kept kind of reminding myself watching it, this is 1964 when they're shooting it. There is, sunscreen isn't a thing yet. This is all like just existing. Shooting this film in a loincloth is torture, probably on some level, on one level or another. But I really only knew him as a footnote. I knew him as an actor more than anything else. I'd never seen any of the films he directed. And just doing the research on who he was and what he'd accomplished long before he ever started acting, he was he was going to go to the Berlin Olympics, but turned it down. Yeah. He was a fencer and chose the theater instead, which is such a bizarre and interesting career turn, and then still managed to imbue this physicality in everything. He's clearly comfortable with his shirt off. He understood that, he was as much an attraction visually as the Veld, and his sense of, as a director though, his sense of how to use himself, to use vulnerability and exhaustion and weakness. It's not a vanity production on any level. I mean, he's in phenomenal shape. He would have been, I think, 54 when he made this.
Yeah.
I'm 56. I'd be dead in 3 steps. I have no doubt. This is not.
Like, where's the sunscreen?
Exactly. I would boil away very quickly before I was ever released into the wild. But the stamina required to make the movie, to star in the film, they're all separate elements. And to come out of it with a movie that not only is good, but has a distinct vision. And yeah, you'd mentioned Herzogian. He's the only other filmmaker I could think of to tell this story, just because there is no attempt to, there's no luck. Other than getting the drop on one person very early on and getting a spear out of it, there is no luck. It's all ingenuity and planning and brutality. And that's the Herzogian worldview, right? God doesn't care, nature doesn't care, everything out here wants to kill you. You have to be your best self to survive any of it. And there's this intercutting of, I mean, it's clearly shot with a telephoto lens. It might even have been actual stock footage of these animal battles. It's not a Gila monster, a monitor lizard.
It's a monitor lizard
and a snake.
Yeah, they were there. That's
They actually shot that.
They shot that, and they also because Wilde was very sensitive to real animals being killed on film, the exploitation aspect of that.
Mm-hmm.
He when that fight started to go differently, he tried to intervene, and that's when he got bitten and he had to go off. The film had to stop. He had to go off to hospital. It was, he was right in the thick of it. There was a few spare injuries apparently in the film as well that ended up with people needing medical supervision. It's that kind of realism, even though it does look like stock footage, but when the Bushmen come, that you just have to imagine audiences in '66 when the Bushmen come out of the elephant. That was, it must have just blown the tops of people's heads off to see that, because it's I kind of think it's pre-Africa Addio and all the sort of rise of Mondakan and so forth. I don't think they ever had a Technicolor with a major Hollywood star with that kind of gristle,
No, I don't think so.
But to be honest, the Weissmuller stuff in the 30s, they did some bonkers stuff with animals. Even Swiss Family Robinson, I remember, like, these people are just throwing themselves on the back of ostriches and going berserk. But Weissmuller had, like, there's a few of them, I can't remember which ones they are, but there's some scenes where involving real animals that you think, how the hell did they do this? And not until I saw Roar, which is another film I saw around the same time, when it was a big hit in New Zealand. For some reason, I don't think it virtually didn't get a US release, but
that's right. It didn't surface here until maybe 5 years ago or 6 years ago. I suppose before the pandemic.
Drafthouse kind of relaunched it there.
It was like an ironic masterpiece, but the idea of seeing it in the 70s and receiving it as it was, or I guess the early 80s it would have been when it finally came out.
80, I think. Yeah. 81. So it was, but before that there was. I'm just going down the whole. There was a lot of films that I don't know why, but there was a period where there was a lot of films set in adventure films set in Africa that I just consumed voraciously. So there was stacks and stacks. I could bore you, but going back to like that subgenre, I think it's who knows why. I mean, we know why they connect, because it's the way, horror films work for people as well. But that whole survival genre is something that I would have loved, even though we've just made Bookworm and it's a PG family comedy version, but it is at its core of like being stuck in the wilderness, out of your element, and fish out of water. As a masculine, not masculine, as a father of kids, my deepest fear was like shitting the bed in front of my kids in a time of crisis, and which is the whole genesis of the film Bookworm with the writer Toby. So taking that back, it's kind of like that fear has been there from, I don't know, a long, long time. And as a kid, all the films like A Man in the Wilderness, they were staples of my cinema diet. The Richard Harris films.
Man Called Horse.
Man Called Horse, yeah. But his first one was the Man in the Wilderness that he did, and then there was Jeremiah Johnson. Those sort of rugged outdoorsies one, which leads me to the connection to Naked Prey, which is that the whole thing was based on that John Coulter story of when he was escaping from the Blackfoot tribe and put through the same sort of scenario where he was stripped naked, given a chance to survive, and pulled it off. And, possibly even more extreme, because it was like, I think it was snowbound, and he was in horrendous elements and hiding in beaver dams and everything. And so I'm surprised. I was curious why. Will never know, but why he chose to adapt. Why he just didn't do that story, and why he wanted. There was a deep love connection to Africa with Wilde, that he transposed that story and that idea to that landscape instead of shooting the original John Coulter version.
It's my understanding that it was shifted because of tax breaks and credits and just the funding was much, much easier if they shot it in what was then Rhodesia. And I had it here somewhere. There are some arguments over where exactly it was shot simply because the nations have changed. Things have shifted since.
Yeah, it was right in '65 when it was the change of, Rhodesia became Zimbabwe and Botswana became its own independent region. So yeah, it was right during that independence and changeover when they were actually shooting. It was all going through the motions. So it would have been incredibly complex, I suspect, and probably a bit nerve-wracking that the actual tax breaks were still going to be in place during the whole making of it. But yeah, so yeah, I'm probably so confused. It's like they weren't going to shoot that same scenario in the US with areas of Nevada pretending to be Botswana or whatever. So
No, it was apparently, according to Atkinson's essay, it was going to be the original story, the actual Coulter story, and then they completely originally transposed it. But I don't know, honestly. I mean, I know it's a true story and that it actually happened, but I don't know that it would work the same way. I mean, a white man in an American setting, even though he's a trespasser and he's on indigenous land, there is something really very different when you load in Africa, especially colonial Africa, since they also rolled the timing back to, I think, sometime in the 1850s, 1860s. About this one chance where the indigenous people have a chance to actually enjoy the persecution of a white devil, right? I mean, to use the term that would have been thrown around at the time, and to have him ultimately demonstrate that he is every bit as horrible as they think he is, as they think the species is, or the race is a really daring choice. He sets their habitat on fire. He's resourceful, but he's also willing to stop at nothing. And it's partially because they're trying to kill him, of course, but also there are places where human dignity can rear its head, and he simply refuses those things until the very end when he finds a defenseless child and reasserts his humanity in the face of black people enslaving other black people. So even then the morals are sort of attenuated to a level where an audience can feel good about this decision, and everybody gets, presumably the white audience feels catered to in that he turns out to be the better person. But the film up until that point has really drawn no moral distinction between what he does and what they are trying to do to him. It is like it's a battle of equals, which I think is the other reason it's so interesting as a survival story.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's right from the start that the balance is tipped towards the indigenous culture in the way that the fat cat financier of the whole expedition is so overtly larger than life as a despicable villain that even things like what seems shocking now is that Wilde, when he says you were shooting non-ivory elephants, is like even just ivory hunting now is like you're instantly cancelled. But somehow it's that's delivered as like the good thing, and this guy is so it's kind of set up in favor that we kind of our allegiance at that stage is like, yeah, this is a despicable human, and his just desserts are coming, and Wilde is like, we still don't know the man at all apart from just the stoicism that he exudes.
Hey, it's Norm interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the Odd Streaming Project. Last week, I wrote about the new releases of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, Immaculate, and Tarot, and the new 4K editions of Twister, Matinee, and UHF. So, something for everybody. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link at the Semcast Blue Sky account. You like reading about movies? I like writing about them. Come check it out. All we know is that he's married, or he was, and the ring is of some importance to him, and that he also turns down the offer to join a slave trade, which, again, like these tiny little moral choices at the very beginning that maybe make it clear that he is deserving of the chance of the lion, if nothing else, that he is the better person in this party. Yeah. But once the die is cast, he's as awful as anyone.
Yeah. I mean, did you, just when you mentioned the slave traders, it was really interesting. You must have noticed that there was that one actor who plays 3 roles in the film. And I'm just wondering whether it was just lack of casting, but there's that, I can't remember what his name is, but he plays he plays an Irish soldier. He plays one of the slave traders.
Oh, and then he shows up in brownface at the very end.
Yeah, right.
Gets the thorns in his face.
Yeah, and he's and I'm just not sure. Yeah, I just don't know whether that was just a some sort of inside joke for with Wilde using him, or he's just a good mate. But it's an unusual choice because the roles weren't like heavy lifting, like.
And he's distinctive enough that we do notice.
Yeah,
although it didn't occur. I mean, I have to admit, I didn't think of it until you just pointed it out. But it's like, yeah, that is the same guy.
It is the same guy, yeah, and it felt really noticeable when I got the film print and watched it for that time. But let's just talk. Can we talk about Ken Gumpu and how incredible he is in this film? And this was really, I mean, he became a mainstay in a lot of films, so he became highly recognizable for me, and especially things like, I don't know how it played in the US, but The Gods Must Be Crazy was massive. Like it was one of the first films I remember playing for an entire year in one cinema.
We had that here in Toronto as well. It ran for 2 years at I want to say the International, or maybe the Park. It was one of the Yonge Street art house theaters that was La Cage aux Folles would run for 2 years as well. It was just the same thing over and over and over again, and people would constantly stream in to see this thing they'd been hearing about for so long. But yeah, The Gods Must Be Crazy. Oh, massive, massive international hit.
Yeah. I mean, Ken just became, I don't know, he was, I don't know. I mean, it was lucky casting because I think he'd been literally, that was his first sort of major role. I think the other ones were just completely tiny bit parts, but then it was just a springboard to solid roles and things like Wild Geese, and some of them are not culturally sensitive over the years, but he ended up being, he worked a long time. He just became his crossover. He also spoke, I think he was utilized by a lot of crews and companies because he spoke 7 of the dialects in the region or something, and so he had the ability to be that connective tissue for a lot of productions. And so I think he was a highly sought after individual, but just a very striking presence on screen. His face just born for CinemaScope. Like it's the use of close-ups in CinemaScope, which is terrifying sometimes when you're shooting things because it's the focal matters involved. But there's that incredible scene where Wilde is listening. I think Atkinson talks about it, right? And his ear, the whole screen is his ear and his eye, and it's like as he's Wilde's picking up sounds. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like it ever since. Incredible.
No, and it is like the lack of vanity of an actor just letting the camera do that to him, to distort him into pieces in his own movie. But it's part of this almost. I mean, I keep coming back to the word muscular to describe the direction, because it is, right? I mean, you are picked up and shaken and thrown into this world and pulled along on the journey, but to reduce someone to the component parts that will save him, which this film does frequently, hands, feet, to the point where the close-ups of the treads on the shoes are starting to be
Yeah.
revealed in the final scenes. But no, but like it doesn't matter at that point. It's perfectly fine that you catch, he's wearing flesh colored underpants
Yeah.
when he runs through the brush because of
Which
course
to
you're
be honest, I never picked up, but it's so obvious once that new Criterion release came out. But
yeah.
I swear, as when I saw that film, that you would never pick that up. Like I don't think anyone who saw that on first release, um, your mind doesn't go to those areas of
No,
that
no, no, exactly.
of it is, but it is something that nowadays you pick up on those elements. But yeah, it would never
Yeah.
have been a distraction back in the day.
It is something I wonder about if, the it's not even the resolution necessarily, but the definition and the way films are remastered and restored now, we are seeing more than would have been, ideal in a on a grainy 35 millimeter print. The grain would cover that sort of thing, and the filmmakers would know it, so they could get away with things. And now, of course, everybody's complaining that everything looks fakey, but it's just like it was 50 odd years ago, and the audience wasn't looking. They weren't
Yeah.
hoping to puncture the illusion. They wanted to be lost into it, which is something that over and over again is something I'm confronting as a a critic and a programmer, where you're just trying to get people to look to see the intention and what it was and what it is now.
There's the train spotters of cinema as well, right? So I always had a few issues with, and no, I'm not throwing shade at periodicals like Video Watchdog and things, but that whole obsessive nature of drilling down to like breaking apart the artifice of cinema. Just yeah, it felt like kind of missing the forest for the trees in a way, like uh, yeah, it's about look that it's I'm glad that the restorations have happened, but I still want to escape into the nostalgia of being that kid where everything was real and it felt real, and to have it's why as an adult I don't get scared by horror anymore, but as a kid, Lost in Space was enough for me to hide behind the couch. So that primitive and primal filmmaking, and I'll tell you another film that really hit me, which is in terms of the sensitivity that Naked Prey has, it's completely opposite. It's the Italian film Last Cannibal World, which in some ways is one of the top tier of that subgenre, which are notorious in their insensitivity usually. But this one, Last Cannibal, was actually a really great survivor. It was also called The Last Survivor in the US, and it's a man alone in the jungle with the natives as this scary near alien um, conflicts. So I'm just rambling, but so yeah, but that film is like it's kind of like the flip side of what Wilde manages to pull off in The Naked Prey. But they both have that um, inherent raw filmmaking style. And if you're ever short of another survival film, I recommend it for certain things. If you're an animal lover, it's probably not the best one to go because they're notoriously um, blasé with the treatment of animals in those films. Even Naked Prey, I feel like for certain animal lovers is going to be upsetting in some respects.
Yeah, those opening elephant shots are real, are they not?
Yeah, and yeah, it's real safari footage, right? So it's like, and I'm pretty sure it's pre-culling where they do that for conservation methods, which I'm not sure whether I ever buy that argument, but there's been a lot of people who push that agenda that it is, in some respects, there is a benefit from it. But yeah, um, there's other things about when I was just trying to look up the connections with Naked Prey that I just find, which lead me to other sort of personal, films that have and it had an impact on me. Is like Philip Jordan was a writer of the notorious film Night Train to Terror, which is like it's a film you'll never have heard of, and
No.
there's no interest in seeing. but it is to trash film connoisseurs. It's one of the holy grails. Anyway, that guy, Philip Jordan, who had an illustrious career as a writer, like he was writing at nearly 90 when I think he dropped at 88 or 89 years of age. He was when Wilde did his first film, he created a company called Theodora,
I
based
think that
on
sounds right.
Theodore Irvine, right? Yeah, who was his acting coach. So he made that with his wife, Jean Wallace. They made this company called Theodora, and the first film out was The Big Combo. And Jordan wrote The Big Combo with Wilde, so they had this connection from there. And I was just like, that can't be the same Philip Jordan, because The Big Combo is such a phenomenal film noir. I was like, that can't be the same Philip Jordan who wrote this incredible trash film, Night to Train to Terror. But it was, and it was like. And then I started going down that rabbit hole of looking at that guy's career. This has nothing to do with The Naked Prey. I'm so sorry, but I was just fascinated that there was a loose connection to Cornel Wilde and so Naked Prey from one of my favorite bad movies of all time.
It's always wonderful to see the spider's web, right? Like all the things that connect and pull and yank. And we were talking at the very beginning of this about the way that Bookworm is entirely not The Naked Prey. It's a PG-rated family, not really survival thriller, but just people in the outdoors trying to figure themselves out.
Yeah, it's a buddy movie. It's a buddy movie with a couple of odd ducks who need to bond to survive, and it's and it's surprisingly sweet for my history of like carnage in cinema that I've been involved with.
I was going to say.
Yeah, it is a real change of pace, and we kind of liked Toby and I who work on these projects. There's in our back of our heads we've got a loose trilogy with Elijah Wood of films that sort of involve fathers and masculinity and stripping things away and poking fun at ourselves and sort of amplifying things for comedic effect, all stemming from real life personal trauma, which is what Bookworm at its core was based on. This was what should have been a fun hike around an island ended in absolute abject terror for me and the kids and the wife, and so that was kind of mined to, and Bookworm was what came out of that experience, and Toby wrote a wonderful script based on it. One other bit of trivia before we lose each other is I'd never heard this before, that Joel and Ethan Coen apparently remade it, right? That there's like a short version that they did of Naked Prey around in like 1970.
Yeah, with a friend of theirs, with a neighbor friend, and they would have been in their late teens when they did this, just playing around with a film camera, I assume.
Is that available anywhere?
Not to my knowledge, no. I think it's also possible, given the Coens, that they just said that one time and it became,
right.
They're real print the legend guys, the two of them.
Thanks to law, yeah. I like that they chose it, though. Obviously, they know the film and there's a fondness, I would hope.
Yeah, well, I can also see them resonating with it, or rather, it resonating with them, because it is such pure filmmaking. I mean, now that I think about it, No Country for Old Men is very similar in its quiet. It's there's no score in No Country for Old Men. There's only really drum beats and singing in the Naked Prey. They're very aesthetic in the way they set that stage for every scene in that film. It just takes place. It opens very slowly, and we're brought into the world, and then we're thrust back out into the next thing. I could absolutely see them responding to it, because I kept thinking, or rather, I kept trying to think of how an audience would have received this in 1966, because it's not like anything else that's out there, and it does lay the groundwork, as you said, for a lot of the survival cinema that followed. I think they're all trying to chase the same thing. And this is my favorite part. It got an Academy Award nomination for Best Screenplay. The script is 9 pages long.
Yeah.
And it's just pure. I would love to read that script because I'm very, very interested in, I mean, how much of it was improvised, how much of it was made up on the day. Is the dialogue, like, couldn't have been written out line for line, but how much consulting, how open was Wilde on the day to figuring out how it was going to work with the actors? And is it simply this confrontation happens, there is an animal, someone is bitten by a snake? How do you embark on something like this with the merest of outlines? Because that feels like a challenge the Coens would jump on too.
Yeah, I think that the way that they didn't bother subtitling that there is a lot of dialogue, native dialogue, in it, and they didn't. There's not all those other layers that filmmakers that don't have that strength of commitment and realization that they would possibly second guess themselves with a really bombastic score, hypercutting, dual narratives, not just being tight and close with the lead the entire time, going off to another, story arc somewhere and coming back. Like, there's a lot of decisions made in creating The Naked Prey and why it stands as an all-timer for me, and that it's timeless and peerless because of those respects, because of those decisions of not adding all that superficiality of what contemporary audiences, even at that time, probably expected in their films, with the overarching nature of raising the stakes unnecessarily, and just not having the faith of the stripped down material that you have, and that deeply knowing that that's the way to go, and actually pulling back the skin and just being as raw as hell is what's going to make the thing work, and all those elements. And I'm so happy that the studio didn't come in and add all these sort of demands and later on, and that he got his dream. And I also think he was fiercely independent, like just the nature of his career. He was one of the first actors who fought a studio about payment and got suspended because he knew his value and his worth. I've collected his films. I've got Beach Red on 35, which I tell you what, you show an audience. I showed it to an audience at 3 a.m. during a marathon, a 24-hour movie marathon I do every year in a cinema. And Beach Red at 3 a.m., I tell you what, it's hallucinogenic, and it drove people insane because there is a non-stop. You feel like you have PTSD after it because it's the explosions and the gunfire. It's just a non-stop. You come out shell-shocked from that film, and no wonder Scorsese rates it so highly, because it's such a visceral experience watching that. And then No Blade of Grass, that's a bizarre hybrid of a movie. You have this ecological societal breakdown film mixed with a biker movie, cross with like a human drama, and there's this kind of dystopian future added to it. It's really unusual, and it's really there's some just phenomenal performances, some scenery chewing in it, which I'm absolutely okay with at certain moments, but just a highly unique original vision. Like, I just think Wilde is just underrated across the board, isn't celebrated enough. He's a really unique individual in the pantheon of those kind of, an auteur in a lot of respects, even though people find that word problematic in cinema academia, but it's I feel like he's absolutely worth celebrating.
Oh yeah, I still throw it around. Don't worry. And we usually go out in the podcast. We sort of talked about the influences, but we usually go out with a question of whether there's anything from the film you chose that you've drawn on directly yourself. And I'm trying to see. I think, if anything, the entirety of Bookworm exists as a refutation of The Naked Prey, which is that when challenged, people are trying to be their best, but without hurting each other. I can't really see a straight line, but is there something in there that resonates for you? Is there something that you lifted or outright
Yeah,
stole?
I mean, it's pretty black and white for me. It's the fight or flight. What would you do? And it's always been there for me. That whole questioning of I come from a very stoic southern stock in New Zealand. My father was, he grew up as a kid working in high stations. He was shearing sheep when he was 7. He was a boxer. That type of towering figure to look up to as a kid, I always felt somewhat emasculated as, and there was these levels of being a Kiwi male, rugby, drinking, hard living, farm work, all that kind of stuff and then, escaping into cinema where those adventures, those man alone survival stories, I completely I couldn't do it in real life because I was living a middle class, very comfortable existence, but I kept inserting myself into these narratives in cinema and books and literature of that. What would I do? Am I capable of stepping up when I needed to? And it's just always been there. And I find I'm I'm always going to be deeply connected with those survival films and being one with nature in all its beauty and wonder, but also in its terror and unforgiving nature as well.
Yeah. There is something really lovely about casting Elijah Wood as your avatar there, as your alter ego, because he is on site, just no matter what he's trying to do in this film or in Come to Daddy, he's a kind-hearted person, and his watching him be confronted over and over again with these impossible situations and not even necessarily incredible, but just logically challenging situations and deflate instantly and then try to immediately find some sort of meaning or reason for why things have happened. I mean, watching him flail through the entire first half of Come to Daddy is such a pleasure, and then to see where that film goes, which I will not disclose, but the revelations that follow with where it ends up and what he's asked to do as an actor and as a character is a great deal of fun. But in Bookworm, there is something really gentle and lovely about someone who is really honestly trying to be the best version of himself and doesn't understand how to do it. Because I think
Yeah.
that's something we all absolutely come up against, whether or not we're parents, once we're adults, because none of us really knows. Like, we're all faking it, we're all pretending.
Yeah. I mean, the parental obligations. Just there's also, he's an absent dad as well, so he's got a massive guilt factor to overcome, and then on top of that, it's like, whether he has the cojones to man up, and I use that expression in like comedic terms, to to meet the situation and the needs of a young daughter who seems more capable than he is in the scenario, which is just, adds a little bit of salt to the wounds. But Elijah's just a great avatar for that because he's got that natural empathy from the audience. There's such a likability factor that you can have him. Like in Come to Daddy, he was, one of the worst individuals on earth, an entitled white, rich white boy from LA, wannabe muso DJ. Like you couldn't get an individual who's probably got more people on his against him than on his side. But the inherent likability of the actor Elijah Wood, just, I mean, the human that he is, helps us, you know, work on all levels. And yeah, they would be very different films with the wrong actor in them. They would be absolute. There would be a hard ask for the audience, I think, if we casted someone else. The Bookworms was specifically written for him, so I don't know what the hell we would have done if he hadn't said yes. I would have had to probably get into shape and Cornel Wilde it and change the storyline a little bit.
It's a very different film.
That's I do look. I feel like I want to, if I ever get another chance, there is something about that survival genre that I really want to revisit. Yeah, it's just I always keep thinking about those scenarios and those situations and unexplored lands and yeah, crisis. It's like, I mean, what does Wilde say? He says something about that, without he was always a big fan of violence and drama, I think he said, and it's like without that conflict, there is no drama, so, and that's apparent in all his work. So yeah, and Naked Prey is the Mount Everest of his filmmaking career, I feel.
My thanks to Ant Timpson, whose charming new film Bookworm opens the Fantasia Film Festival in Montreal this Thursday, July 18th. If you're in town, tickets might still be available at fantasiafestival.com. Thanks also to Winnie Wong. She knows what she did. You can find Ant on Instagram at Ant Timpson, all one word, and you can find The Naked Prey on Blu-ray and DVD in the Criterion Collection. It's also available to rent or buy on various VOD services across North America. You can find me on Blue Sky at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 44 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps, it truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get the new booster when you can. I'll see you next week.